They laughed at him again that morning. The delivery guy with the brown uniform and tired eyes. He had been bringing packages to that same tall glass building for years, yet no one ever really saw him. They just signed the paper, barely looked up and went back to their screens. But that day felt different. As he dropped off a box at the front desk of Whitmore and Klein, he heard laughter coming from a group near the corner. "Can you imagine if the delivery guy was our boss one day?" one of them joked. More laughter followed. Someone added, "Yeah, right, he's probably only good at lifting boxes." The whole group laughed louder. Dorian didn't turn around. He just stood there, face calm, eyes quiet. But inside, something cracked. He finished the delivery, handed the tablet to the receptionist, and walked toward the exit without saying a word. As he reached the door, his reflection looked back at him through the glass. The uniform, the rough hands, the same tired face people looked through every day. And for the first time, he didn't feel invisible. He felt awake. That laughter had lit something in him he didn't even know was there. That night, he sat in his old van for a long time before going inside. His apartment was small. One bedroom, old carpet, the hum of a fridge that never stopped. He sat on the couch, still hearing the laughter in his head. He picked up the phone and called his older brother, Malcolm. "You good?" Malcolm asked. "Yeah," Dorian said quietly. "Just a rough day." "Let me guess," Malcolm said. "Someone made you feel like you don't belong again?" Dorian gave a small laugh. "Yeah, you could say that." Malcolm paused for a moment, then said, "Good." "Good?" Dorian repeated. "Yeah," Malcolm said. "Means you're finally tired of it. You either prove them right or you prove them wrong." Those words stuck with Dorian. Prove them wrong. The next few weeks, Dorian's life didn't look different from the outside, but something inside him had shifted. He spent his evenings watching videos on business and finance, learning how companies work. He started reading about investments, about how people built success from nothing. He began meeting with small business owners, helping them organize things for free, just to learn. What most people didn't know was that Dorian was already smart with money. He had been flipping sneakers and cars for profit since his teenage years. He just never took it seriously. Until now. Late at night, when everyone else was asleep, he was making plans. Quietly, patiently. He noticed something about Whitmore and Klein, the same place that mocked him. They were losing clients fast. The company looked rich on the outside, but inside it was falling apart. That's when Dorian saw his chance. He reached out to a private investor named Anthony Wells, a serious man with a sharp mind. Dorian showed him everything. The company's weak points, their mistakes, their wasted money. Wells was impressed. "You've got a good eye," he said. "What do you want to do about it?" "I want to buy them," Dorian replied. Wells smiled. "That's bold." "No," Dorian said. "It's smart." With Wells backing him, Dorian started reaching out to Whitmore and Klein's silent investors. Many wanted out. The company's future looked dark. One by one, Dorian made offers, and quiet, professional, calculated. Within months, he owned most of the company. The same company that had laughed at him now belonged to him. The morning he decided to visit, he didn't wear his uniform. He wore a clean navy suit and carried a folder under his arm. When he walked into the building, people stared. The same receptionist who once ignored him straightened up fast. "I need to see Mr. Langford," Dorian said. When he entered the CEO's office, Langford barely looked up. "Make it quick," he said. Dorian placed the folder on the desk. "I own the company now," he said calmly. Langford laughed. "You? You're the delivery guy." "Not anymore," Dorian said. "Check the papers." When Langford opened the documents, the color drained from his face. Dorian had bought every major share. It was official. He was the new owner. "I'll give you till the end of the day to clear your office," Dorian said. And before walking out, he added softly, "I'm sure there's a delivery job out there for you somewhere." That afternoon, Dorian called for a full company meeting. The same people who once mocked him stood silent in front of him now. "Some of you laughed at me once," he began, "but I didn't come here for revenge. I came here for change. This company has been sinking because people stopped caring. That ends today." He looked straight at Ryan, the man who led the jokes. "If you can't handle working under me," Dorian said calmly, "the door's right there." Ryan scoffed, muttered something under his breath, and walked out. No one followed him. When the room went quiet again, Dorian said, "For those who stay, We rebuild. Together. Later that evening, Dorian stood in his new office, the same one that once belonged to Langford. The city lights reflected against the window. For the first time in years, he felt peace. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about respect, the kind you earn, not the kind people give. He smiled slightly and whispered to himself, "Never underestimate someone just because of where they start. Because one day they might be signing your paycheck." That night felt heavy, the kind of night when silence feels louder than words. Dorian sat alone in his van long after finishing his last delivery. The streetlight outside painted a soft orange glow across the cracked windshield. He could still hear their laughter echoing in his head, sharp, careless, and cold. He rested his forehead against the steering wheel. He wasn't angry anymore, not exactly. Anger fades fast. This was something deeper, something that sat heavy in his chest. For years, he had told himself that what people thought didn't matter, that as long as he worked hard and stayed humble, life would reward him somehow. But tonight that belief felt weak, because sometimes the world doesn't notice you unless you make it. After a long pause, he finally stepped out of the van and walked toward his small apartment building. The stairs creaked under his boots. Inside, the air smelled faintly of old carpet and coffee. He dropped his keys on the counter, sat down on the couch, and just stared at the wall for a while. He picked up his phone and called the only person who ever saw him for who he truly was, his older brother, Malcolm. "Hey," Malcolm said, voice calm and steady. "Rough day?" "You could say that," Dorian sighed. Malcolm chuckled lightly. "Let me guess. Some people made you feel like you didn't belong again?" "Yeah," Dorian replied quietly. "They laughed at me, man. Like I was a joke, like I could never be more than a guy in a uniform." There was a pause. Then Malcolm said something Dorian wasn't expecting. "Good, good?" Dorian repeated. "You serious?" "Yeah," Malcolm said firmly. "Because that means you're finally tired of it. You've been playing small for too long. When people underestimate you, you've got two choices, like you can believe them or you can prove them wrong." The line went silent for a few seconds. Dorian looked around his dim apartment, the peeling paint, the dented fridge, the stack of bills on the counter. He'd been surviving, not living. "Prove them wrong, huh?" he finally whispered. "That's right," Malcolm said. "You've got more in you than they'll ever see, but you've got to stop acting like you don't." After they hung up, Dorian sat in silence, but his thoughts were loud. That night, he opened his old laptop, the one with the cracked hinge down, and started looking up everything he could about business, finance, and investing. He wasn't starting from zero. He'd always had a sharp mind for numbers. Back in high school, while other kids were wasting money, Dorian was flipping sneakers online, limited editions, hard-to-find releases, and making double or triple the price. Later, he moved to cars. He could spot a deal faster than most trained salesmen. He had that instinct, that quiet, natural understanding of value. He never bragged about it, never showed off. But now, sitting there at 2 a.m., he realized maybe he'd been hiding behind his own fear. Maybe that delivery uniform had become more than a job. It had become a cage. So he started using his nights differently. No more scrolling, no more complaining, just learning. Every evening after work, he'd sit with his laptop, watching tutorials, reading articles, taking notes. He studied how companies grew, how they fell, and why. He watched business talks, read about leadership, and learned how people built entire empires from nothing. The more he learned, the more confident he became. He realized that power didn't just belong to people with fancy suits or big titles. It belonged to the ones who understood the game. Weeks turned into months. And slowly, Dorian's world began to change. He started helping a small local cafe fix their finances. In return, the owner gave him free coffee and gratitude. He helped a mechanic friend negotiate a better deal for parts. He didn't make much money, but he gained something more valuable: experience. Word began to spread. People started trusting his advice, but still he kept his day job. Every morning he'd show up in that same uniform, deliver packages to those same marble floors, and hear the same fake laughter from those who thought he was beneath them. They didn't know what he was building after hours. They didn't know that behind that quiet smile was a man planning something far bigger than anyone could imagine. One evening, while scrolling through his notes, he noticed something strange. The same company that mocked him, Whitmore and Klein, was in trouble. He found an online report about client losses and late payments. Their numbers didn't add up. On the surface, they looked successful. Polished offices. Big-name clients. But behind the scenes, they were cracking. Dorian stared at the screen for a long time. A slow, knowing smile crept across his face. "Maybe this is it," he whispered. "Maybe this is where it all turns around." That night, he didn't sleep. He made a plan. He started tracking the company quietly, reading everything he could find. Public reports, news updates, social media posts. He took notes, analyzed their clients, studied their weaknesses. The more he looked, the clearer it became. Whitmore and Klein wasn't as untouchable as they thought. They were slipping, and soon they'd fall into the hands of someone smarter, someone like him. For the first time in years, Dorian felt something stronger than pain or pride. He felt purpose. The next morning, Dorian woke up before the alarm. The sun hadn't even risen, but he was already sitting at his small kitchen table with his laptop open and a notebook by his side. The pages were filled with handwritten notes, numbers, company names, short scribbles that only he could understand. The coffee in his mug had gone cold, but he didn't care. He was studying Whitmore and Klein like his life depended on it. Their yearly reports, their old client lists, even the way they marketed themselves online. From the outside, everything still looked shiny. Fancy events, big-name partnerships, polished websites. But underneath, he could see the cracks forming. High turnover, late payments, and clients quietly leaving without saying much. The kind of silence that meant trouble. He leaned back and smiled to himself. The same people who had laughed at him were walking straight toward a cliff. And they didn't even know it yet. For weeks, Dorian balanced two lives. In the mornings, he was still the polite delivery guy, scanning packages, holding doors open, blending into the background. But at night, he became something else entirely. He was the strategist, the watcher, the man planning his next move. Sometimes, while walking through the Whitmore and Klein lobby with a box in his hands, he would glance around quietly, noting every detail. The empty cubicles, the new receptionist, the forced smiles, the way senior employees argued in whispers near the elevators. To most people, those were small things. To Dorian, they were signs. Signs that the building wasn't as steady as it looked. He started reaching out to people, quietly, carefully. Old friends from his sneaker trading days, a retired banker he'd met through a delivery route, even a small business owner he once helped recover from debt. They all knew Dorian as the man who never complained and always delivered. When he told them what he was planning, most didn't believe him at first. "You?" one of them said. "By Whitmore and Klein?" Dorian only smiled. "Not yet. But soon." One night he got a meeting with someone who could actually make it possible. Anthony Wells. A serious man, older, sharp suit, the kind of person who could spot weakness in any business with one glance. They met in a quiet lounge downtown. Dorian sat across from him, nervous but composed. He explained everything, the numbers, the losses, the opportunity. Wells listened silently, eyes steady. "So," he said finally, "you want to buy a company full of people who used to laugh at you?" Dorian didn't hesitate. "I want to rebuild a company that forgot how to respect people." For a moment, Wells didn't speak. Then he smiled, slow and impressed. "You've got fire, kid. But do you have proof?" Dorian pulled out his folder. Printed documents, charts, handwritten analysis. Every page detailed, precise, confident. Wells went through them one by one. Halfway through, he looked up again. "You did all this yourself?" "Every bit of it," Dorian said. Wells nodded. "Then maybe you don't need luck. You just need backing." He signed the first check that night. Not a huge amount, but enough to start moving. Dorian felt something in his chest shift. Not pride, not revenge, but momentum. Over the next few months, he started working in silence. Late-night meetings, quiet phone calls, long hours staring at spreadsheets. He found the old investors who once believed in Whitmore and Klein but had given up. Many of them were desperate to sell their shares before the company collapsed. Dorian offered fair prices, sometimes slightly more than the market would. Slowly, piece by piece, he began collecting ownership. No one at the company knew. To them, he was still just the delivery guy. He'd walk in with boxes, smile politely, and listen as they complained about how bad things were getting. One day, while signing off a delivery, he even overheard Ryan, the same senior executive who mocked him. complaining about budget cuts. "They're bleeding money," Ryan said. "If the CEO doesn't fix it soon, we're done." Dorian bit the inside of his cheek to keep from smiling. At night, he would spread papers across his kitchen table, checking off names, one investor after another. Each deal brought him closer to his goal. It wasn't easy. Some people doubted him. Some laughed. But he'd been laughed at before. That didn't stop him then, and it wouldn't stop him now. There were setbacks, too. A deal that almost fell through. A night when a financial partner backed out last minute. He'd stare at his computer screen until dawn, exhausted, questioning himself. But every time he thought about quitting, he'd remember that moment, that laughter echoing through the marble office. And suddenly he'd find the strength to keep going. Finally, after months of quiet effort, it happened. He closed the last deal. The final investor signed the papers and shook his hand. Dorian walked out of that meeting holding a folder that officially named him the majority owner of Whitmore & Klein. He didn't celebrate. He didn't even smile right away. He just sat in his van again, the same one he'd driven for years, and stared at the city lights through the windshield. The same man who had been delivering packages to that building was now the man who owned it. The city felt different that night. The air was cool, calm. He could almost hear his father's voice, the one that used to tell him, "Respect isn't given, son. It's earned." Dorian leaned back in his seat and whispered, "I guess it's time they learn that too." The morning of the takeover was quiet, the kind of quiet that carries weight. Dorian woke up before sunrise, staring at the ceiling for a while, feeling that strange mix of calm and storm inside him. He got dressed slowly, not in his brown delivery uniform, not today. He opened his closet and pulled out a navy blue suit he had bought months ago but never worn. The fabric still smelled new. He stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his tie. The man staring back at him didn't look like the man who used to haul boxes up long stairways or wait for people to sign without even glancing at him. His reflection felt stronger, sharper, steadier. The same man, but different soul. He drove downtown with the same old van, but this time there were no packages in the back. Just a single brown folder, thick, sealed, and heavier than it looked. As the city lights blurred past the windshield, he caught himself smiling for the first time in weeks. Not the kind of smile that comes from joy, but the kind that comes from purpose finally finding its place. When he pulled into the parking lot of Whitmore & Klein, the building looked the same. Tall glass walls reflecting the golden sunrise. People rushing through the doors with coffee cups in hand. For years, he had walked through those same doors carrying someone else's name on a delivery slip. But today he was walking in with his own. He stepped inside. The marble floors gleamed as usual. The receptionist, the same one who had barely looked at him for years, froze when she saw him. "Good morning," Dorian said, his voice calm but firm. Good morning," she stammered, eyes darting to his suit. "Can I help you?" "Yes," Dorian said, setting the folder on the counter. "I'm here to see Mr. Langford." She hesitated. "Do you have an appointment?" He smiled faintly. "You could say that." Moments later, she buzzed the CEO's assistant, her voice trembling slightly. "There's a visitor here to see Mr. Langford. He says it's urgent." Upstairs, the CEO, Richard Langford, was already in a foul mood. He'd just gotten off a stressful call with a client threatening to pull their account. The last thing he wanted was some walk-in wasting his time. "Who is it?" he asked without looking up. The assistant, Ellen, cleared her throat. "A man named Dorian Matthews." Langford frowned. "Who?" "The delivery man," she said carefully. Langford laughed, short and sharp. "You mean the guy who brings the boxes? What could he possibly want?" "He said it's urgent," Ellen replied softly. Langford sighed. "Fine, send him in. Let's see what this joke is about." When Dorian walked into the office, the energy in the room changed. Langford leaned back in his leather chair, eyebrows raised, half smirk on his face. "Well, this is unexpected. What can I do for you, Mr. Matthews, was it?" Dorian stepped forward, calm and unshaken. He placed the brown folder on the desk. "It's actually what I can do for you, Mr. Langford, or rather, what I've already done." Langford gave a dry laugh. "I don't have time for riddles." "What is this?" "Your future," Dorian said simply. "You might want to read it carefully." Langford opened the folder, slowly at first, then faster. His eyes darted from page to page. The room went quiet except for the sound of papers flipping. Then his face changed. The color drained, his jaw tightened. This is a mistake, he muttered. You can't own Whitmore and Klein, that's impossible. Dorian didn't blink. Check the signatures. Langford looked again. Every name, every deal, every signature was real. The investors had sold, the contracts were binding, and all of it pointed to one name. Dorian Matthews. Langford leaned back, his confidence cracking. Who the hell do you think you are? Dorian's voice was steady. I think I'm your new boss. For a long second, Langford just stared, mouth half open. Then quietly he said, You planned this. I earned this, Dorian replied. Every bit of it. He turned toward the window, looking down at the busy city below. For years I walked through this building and no one saw me. People looked through me, laughed behind my back, made me believe I didn't belong. But while you were busy running this company into the ground, I was learning how to build one. Langford's lips tightened. You think you can just walk in here and take over my company? It's not your company anymore, Dorian said. You sold that right the moment you stopped caring about it. He picked up the folder and tucked it under his arm. You have until the end of the day to clear your office. I'll be taking your seat now. Langford stood up abruptly. This isn't over. Dorian turned, a faint smirk on his face. No, Mr. Langford, it's just beginning. As Dorian walked out, the whispers started. People turned their heads, eyes wide. The receptionist stood up straight, unsure if she should say anything. He didn't stop. His footsteps echoed against the marble floor. The same sound that once meant a delivery had arrived, but now it meant change had come. He pressed the elevator button and waited. Behind him, people were already gathering in small groups, asking each other, what just happened? When the doors opened, Dorian stepped inside, exhaled slowly, and whispered under his breath, Let's get to work. As the elevator ascended to the top floor, to the office that would now be his, he could feel something shifting deep inside. This wasn't revenge anymore. It was reclamation. A man reclaiming his worth, his dignity, his story. By the time the elevator doors opened, the entire office floor had gone silent. The man they once ignored had come back, not as a worker, not as a joke, but as the owner. He walked to the big corner office, the one that had always been out of reach, and turned the handle. Inside, everything smelled of expensive cologne and ego. He stood in the middle of the room, looked out the window at the city below, and smiled softly. He whispered to himself, They said I could never lead a company. Now I own the one that mocked me. The air inside Whitmore and Klein felt heavier than ever. You could almost taste the tension. Word was spreading fast, whispers darting across cubicles like wildfire. The delivery guy had just walked into the CEO's office, and the CEO hadn't walked out looking the same. Some people laughed nervously, thinking it was a rumor. Others were glued to their screens, pretending to work, but glancing toward the elevator every few seconds. Something big was happening, and everyone could feel it. Dorian walked back through the main hall, steady and quiet. His posture alone demanded attention. Not arrogant, not loud, but certain. Years of being ignored had taught him how to command silence without saying a word. He stopped by the assistant's desk. Ellen looked up at him, half nervous, half curious. She'd been there longer than anyone else. She'd seen executives rise and fall, clients come and go. But she had never seen anything like this. Ellen, Dorian said softly, I need everyone in the main conference room. 10 minutes, her eyebrows lifted slightly. Everyone? Everyone, he repeated. It's time they knew who's really running this place. Ellen hesitated, then nodded. She opened her email and started typing. A company-wide notice flashed across screens moments later. Mandatory meeting in the main conference room. All staff immediately. Within minutes, the sleek glass room began to fill. The sound of shoes on tile, murmured voices, confusion. The senior staff stood together, whispering among themselves. Junior employees stood near the back, watching everything quietly. Ryan Caldwell, the same man who once made jokes about Dorian, was there too. He leaned against the table, arms folded, a smirk playing at the corner of his mouth. Probably another speech about budget cuts, he muttered. His friend snickered. Or maybe they're firing the cleaning crew this time. Their laughter stopped when the door opened. Dorian walked in. No delivery bag, no uniform, no scanner on his belt. Just a man in a perfectly tailored suit, eyes calm and focused. The entire room fell silent. You could hear the air conditioner humming. He didn't rush to speak. He let the silence do the work first. Then slowly, he said, "I'm sure you're all wondering why you were called here." A few people exchanged uncertain looks. Ryan rolled his eyes. "Yeah," he said loudly. "Some of us have actual work to do." Dorian's eyes met his. "You won't for long," he said simply. A few quiet chuckles died in throats. Dorian placed a folder on the table and continued, "As of this morning, I am the new majority owner of Whitmore and Klein." A ripple of disbelief moved through the room. Some laughed, thinking it was a prank, but then they saw his face. He wasn't joking. Ryan spoke again, a forced laugh escaping him. "You, the delivery guy?" Dorian didn't even blink. "The same one you said would never be your boss." That shut him up. Dorian walked slowly around the table, looking each person in the eye. "I've been in this building for years. You've all seen me. Some of you ignored me. Some of you mocked me. But while you were busy looking down, I was watching, learning, and now I own the company you thought I wasn't good enough to step foot in." No one spoke. Some looked down at the floor. Others just stared, wide-eyed. He continued, voice steady but powerful. "I'm not here for revenge. I'm here for change. Because somewhere along the way, this company forgot what respect means. Respect for work, respect for people, respect for purpose. That ends today." He stopped near Ryan. "You once joked that I'd never lead meetings. You were right. I'm not leading meetings anymore." He paused. "I'm leading the company." Ryan clenched his jaw, color rising in his face. "You can't just walk in here and take over everything." "I already have," Dorian said calmly, sliding the official documents toward him. "You can read for yourself." Ryan flipped through them quickly. Signatures, dates, legal stamps, all real. He looked up, speechless. Dorian straightened, scanning the room again. "This company has been losing clients, losing money, and losing integrity because of arrogance and laziness. That stops now. Some of you will stay, some of you won't. By the end of the day, the people who actually care will still have a place here. The ones who don't," he gestured toward the door. "You can follow the ones leaving." The room was completely still. A few people looked nervous. Some looked guilty. A handful, the younger, hard-working ones, looked quietly hopeful. Ryan crossed his arms. "You really think you can run this place better than us?" Dorian stepped closer, lowering his voice. "No," he said. "I know I can, because I've spent my whole life working harder than you ever had to." The silence after that was thick. He turned toward Ellen, who stood quietly near the back. "Please make a list of everyone in management. I'll be meeting with each department before the end of the week, and make sure HR is ready for restructuring." Ellen nodded slowly. She didn't seem afraid. She seemed relieved. Ryan suddenly slammed his hand on the table. "This is insane." "You can't do this." Dorian met his glare with steady eyes. "I already did." Ryan huffed, grabbed his briefcase, and muttered, "Then I quit." Dorian smiled slightly. "That's the first good decision you've made in years." Ryan stormed out, slamming the door behind him. No one moved. Dorian let the moment hang. Then in a quieter tone he said, "For those who are still here, you have a choice. You can cling to the old ways that nearly destroyed this company, or you can help build something better. I'm not asking for loyalty. I'm asking for effort, honesty, and respect." He paused, eyes moving across the room one last time. "Because if I could build all this while being treated like I didn't matter, imagine what we can build together when people finally start being seen." The room was silent, but it wasn't the same kind of silence as before. It wasn't disbelief anymore, it was realization. Dorian gave a small nod. "That's all." He turned and walked toward the door. As it closed behind him, a murmur spread through the room. No one was laughing anymore. He headed down the hall, each step lighter than the last. For the first time in years, he wasn't walking out of Whitmore and Klein as a delivery man. He was walking out as the man who owned it. After that meeting, the whole building felt different. The laughter that once echoed through the glass halls was gone, replaced by whispers and the quiet sound of typing. The mood had shifted, like a storm had passed, but the air was still heavy. People avoided eye contact when Dorian walked by. Some lowered their heads in guilt. Others looked curious, even respectful. They weren't sure what kind of boss he would be, the kind who ruled with anger or the kind who rebuilt with purpose. Dorian didn't say much that first day. He didn't need to. His presence alone spoke louder than any announcement. He spent the morning walking through every department, silently observing. Marketing, sales, accounting, creative, all looked the same on the surface, but he could see the cracks. He saw the fear in the older executives' eyes, the uncertainty in the interns, the exhaustion of the assistants who had been carrying the real weight all along. When he stepped into his new office, the same one that had once belonged to Langford, the silence hit him. The smell of expensive leather and stale ego lingered in the air. He looked around, the shelves lined with untouched business books, the framed awards that meant nothing now, the view of the city that had once felt unreachable. He took a deep breath and whispered to himself, "All right. Time to build." Later that afternoon, Ellen, the assistant who had worked for Langford for 20 years, walked in quietly. She was holding a stack of files. "Here's everything you asked for," she said. "Financial reports, staff evaluations, client lists." Dorian thanked her and gestured for her to sit. "Tell me something," he said softly. "Why did you stay here all these years?" Ellen hesitated. "Habit, I guess, and hope. This place used to mean something, but somewhere along the way the wrong people started running it." "And what about now?" Dorian asked. She looked at him for a long moment, then smiled faintly. "Now, maybe it has a chance again." Those words hit deeper than she knew. Dorian nodded slowly. "Then let's make it worth staying for." That night, long after everyone had gone home, he sat at his desk going through files one by one. He saw numbers that didn't add up, projects that had been overfunded for personal gain, and departments that were being held together by employees who'd never even been recognized. He made notes, dozens of them. Not to fire, not to punish, but to understand. He wasn't here to destroy the company. He was here to rebuild it. But rebuilding meant cutting out the parts that were rotting from the inside. Over the next week, he met with every team, every department head. Some walked into his office defensive, others nervous. Most didn't know what to expect from the delivery guy turned boss. But Dorian wasn't the kind of leader they were used to. He didn't talk in corporate buzzwords. He didn't pretend to know everything. He listened. He asked questions. He remembered people's names, and that alone threw everyone off. In one meeting, a young designer named Mia nervously presented her ideas for a new client campaign. Before, she'd been dismissed by her old managers. But Dorian leaned forward and said, "That's good. You've got a real eye for detail. Keep going." She looked shocked. No one had ever said that to her before. By the end of that meeting, 3 people who had barely spoken in months were talking ideas again. It was small, but Dorian noticed it. The flicker of hope returning. Still, not everyone was happy. Some of the old executives were bitter, whispering behind closed doors, waiting for him to fail. They said things like, "He's lucky, not smart," or "He doesn't understand real business." Dorian heard some of it, but he didn't react. He'd been underestimated before. It didn't bother him anymore. He focused on progress. He canceled wasteful contracts, cut unnecessary spending, and started rebuilding client trust. Slowly, the company began to breathe again. One afternoon, while reviewing reports, Ellen stepped in with a small smile. "You might want to see this," she said, placing a file on his desk. Inside was a message from an old client, one that had left months ago. They wanted to return. Dorian looked at the letter, then at Ellen. "They came back?" "They said they heard Whitmore and Klein has changed," she replied. "They want to work with you personally." Dorian leaned back, smiling quietly. "Then we must be doing something right." Later that evening, he walked through the office again. Most of the lights were off, but a few employees were still working. Not because they were afraid of losing their jobs, but because they actually cared again. That, to Dorian, was the biggest win. As he passed the conference room, he caught a glimpse of his reflection in the glass. No uniform, no company logo, just a man who refused to stay small. He thought back to the laughter, the whispers, the jokes that once cut deep. Now they felt distant and like echoes from another lifetime. He had learned that real success wasn't about proving people wrong. It was about proving yourself right. He returned to his office, sat by the window, and looked out over the city. The lights shimmered against the dark sky. A city full of stories just like his. People fighting silent battles, being overlooked, being doubted. He whispered to himself, "It was never about them. It was about me." He smiled softly, feeling a calm he hadn't felt in years. He knew the work ahead would be hard, restructuring, rebuilding, earning trust. But he also knew one thing for certain. This time he wasn't just passing through. He belonged here. And for the first time in a long time, the man who had once been invisible was finally being seen. Weeks turned into months, and the rhythm inside Whitmore and Klein began to change. The laughter that once mocked had been replaced by the hum of real work. The tension had faded, replaced by something new. Quiet respect. Dorian had done what no one thought possible. He turned the company around. Clients who had walked away came back. The numbers were improving, morale was rising, and even the building itself felt alive again. The halls that once echoed with arrogance now carried purpose. He didn't do it with speeches or threats. He did it by being human. He talked to people, not at them. He gave chances to those who were ignored and demanded accountability from those who had been coasting on ego. And slowly, people began to follow his lead. One morning, as he entered the office, he noticed something small but meaningful. The security guard at the front desk, the same man who had once barely looked up, greeted him with a smile. "Morning, Mr. Matthews," Dorian smiled back. "Morning, Paul." It was a simple exchange, but it said everything. Respect had finally come full circle. Inside, the office buzzed with energy. Meetings were happening, ideas were flowing, and people who had once been invisible now had voices. Dorian made sure of that. Every Friday, he gathered everyone in the lounge for an open talk. No titles, no ranks, just people. He'd listen, ask questions, and end each meeting with the same words. "Your ideas matter. You matter." Those words spread like oxygen through the company. One afternoon, as he was reviewing new contracts, Ellen knocked gently on the door. "You have a visitor," she said, smiling faintly. Dorian looked up. "Who is it?" She stepped aside, and in walked Ryan Caldwell, the same man who had mocked him months ago, the one who quit in anger during that unforgettable meeting. Ryan looked different. No suit, no arrogance, just a quiet man holding a small envelope. He stood at the door for a moment, unsure whether to speak. Dorian gestured to the chair opposite his desk. "Have a seat." Ryan sat down, looking uncomfortable. "I won't take much of your time," he said softly. "I just wanted to say I was wrong." Dorian didn't reply right away. He simply waited. Ryan continued, his voice low. "When you first walked into that office, I laughed. We all did. I thought I was better than you because of a title, because of a suit. But watching what you've done, seeing this place now, you proved all of us wrong. You didn't just take over. You built something better." He placed the envelope on the desk. "That's a reference letter I wrote for myself. I'm not asking for a job. I'm asking for a chance anywhere, doing anything." Dorian looked at him quietly for a long moment, then said, "You don't need a letter." Ryan frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" Dorian leaned forward. "You need a start. That's what I needed once too." He stood, walked to the window, and looked out over the city before turning back. "There's a junior project position opening next week. It's not glamorous, but it's honest work. If you're serious about changing, it's yours." Ryan's eyes widened, his voice shaky. "You'd really give me another chance?" Dorian smiled. "Everyone deserves one." Ryan stood, unable to speak for a moment. Then he nodded, quietly said "thank you," and walked out. Ellen, who had been standing by the door, smiled softly. "You really don't hold grudges, do you?" Dorian turned toward her. "Holding grudges keeps you in the past. I'm trying to build the future." Later that evening, after everyone had gone home, Dorian stayed behind. The city outside was glowing, 1,000 windows shining like tiny stars. He sat at his desk, leaned back, and let the silence settle. For the first time in his life, he felt something he hadn't felt even after becoming the boss: peace. He thought back to all those years, the laughter, the dismissive looks, the quiet nights in that small apartment where he questioned his worth. Every hardship, every insult, every moment of doubt, it had all led him here. He realized now that this story was never about revenge. It was about evolution, about what happens when someone decides they're worth more than what the world tells them they are. He got up, walked to the window, and placed his hand against the glass. The reflection staring back at him wasn't just a man in a suit. It was the same delivery driver, the same dreamer, the same fighter. Just refined by time, by lessons, by grace, he whispered to himself. They once laughed at me for delivering boxes, but what they didn't know is that I was always delivering something bigger. My purpose. He smiled, looking out at the horizon as the city lights danced below. The camera of life had finally come full circle. The man who was once invisible now stood at the top, not above people but among them, and as the night deepened, his words echoed softly in the empty room. A truth he'd earned through every hardship, every late night, every quiet victory. Never underestimate someone because of where they start, because one day they might be the one signing your paycheck,